Hello. This is an attempt at um, practicing philosophy. I've just started an introduction to philosophy class in college. Um, so now that I've been in the class for a while, I've got some ideas and I've got some stuff working around in my head. And I know I'm very early into philosophy, so I don't really, I'm not as updated. Like I don't know what like the current like up to date level of philosophy is and like all the breakthroughs they've made in um, looking at like ethics and perception and stuff like that. Um, but I'm gonna try my hand at it anyway. This is more just exercise than like an actual thing, than an actual philosophy. But this philosophy is about time. In the introduction class, we were reading, I was reading Berkeley, and I liked a lot of stuff that Berkeley was saying. And I was also reading, I think this guy Hume, Hume. I believe that was the last guy we read so far. Um, and it's been just reading what they have to say, all their reasoning and their logic, um, has really been getting my mind working. And so this time philosophy that I've been working on is kind of based on what I've been reading lately. And so time exists beyond our senses, right? So time is extension of anything. Time is both the extension of us being aware of things and extension of those things themselves. Time must exist before or at the same time as anything else that can exist. For our senses to even be senses, there must be time. Without time, there would be nothing. Without extension, there would be nothing. So without time, aka extension of things, there is no things. Everything has extension. If we are aware of it, it's only because it has extension. Everything in and out of our minds. Even if there is no out of our minds, even if there really isn't something beyond our senses, there's still extension, there's still time of our awareness. And if there wasn't be, we wouldn't be able to perceive anything. The fact that our senses continue to perceive in itself proves that time has to exist. What a mystery this time is. Is time an illusion? I would say yes and no. Obviously, this extension of time, this continuation is happening. We continue to perceive things. How, then, can time be an illusion? How can time be nothing but an idea? The idea that time is an illusion is the idea that we perceive time and then proceed to label and define and organize it with our own man made symbols and meanings or mental references that connects it to other ideas. In the terms of, excuse me if I get any of these terms wrong, because I'm still, just starting my journey into philosophy, but in the terms of, I believe it is subjective idealism, which I believe was Berkeley. Um, Everything only exists as an idea in the mind, and that there's no way to prove there's anything beyond a perception, anything beyond a perceiver perceiving senses, or something like that. However, this perception cannot actually exist without being extended in some way. Without an extension of itself, there is no perception. Short term memory, or memory in general, is a necessity for perception. For without memory, then there would be no senses, there would be no connection of ideas. Memory and time both have to exist. Without time, There is no memory. There is no before. There is no after. Time must exist. It is the only thing that absolutely must exist. It is self-evident that time exists. Time proves itself to exist by our senses. Any perception or awareness is proof of time. It's proof of extension. It's proof of continuation. The fact that you can still think right now, even being in the present, the fact that you're experiencing a present is proof of itself that there is continuation because you are still experiencing a present. How can, but here's the twist or the kicker. How can extension exist? How can time exist? There must be an underlying structure, mustn't there be? There must be a cause that time also builds off of. That time must be an effect of something else. If something exists, it is an effect of something, right? So there must be a cause for time, for continuation. Unfortunately, I do not have the information that would make that knowledge possible to me. Whether an answer to that question exists or not, that's not even known. Because even though perhaps there is something deeper than the reality of time, perhaps there is, but one thing is assured, that time must exist, extension must exist, continuation must exist. And as far as I know, there is no piece of information that can currently refute this. But what does that mean? What does it mean? That means that the perceiver itself is not completely alone in existence and perceivability. The perceiver alone is not the absolute core, or is not the absolute only thing that exists. The knowledge that continuation and extension exists does not prove that anything else exists. It does not disprove subjective idealism, really. It doesn't it doesn't prove that there are material substances outside of the mind that we're actually sensing something external. It doesn't it doesn't actually prove that there is a real apple, as to say what a lot of the philosophers we've been reading have always been talking about apples. I guess to build on that, it doesn't really prove that there's like a real apple that we're more than sensing. That it doesn't prove that there's still an apple. Like if we die and if we become unconscious and it's just blackness and we're just done, we're just no more. It doesn't prove that the apple is actually there beyond us. What all it proves is that continuation itself existed alongside our consciousness, our perception. Um, so it doesn't prove that there's anything hidden away from us, that it doesn't prove that there's any secret or mystery that exists without us. It doesn't prove that anything can exist without us and our perception. But it proves that time to continuation, the idea of time, does exist, because without it, we wouldn't have any senses at all. We wouldn't have memory. So, but how egomaniacal of us is it to think that our personal perception is the only existence and that everything else is an illusion? But even though it's sort of egomaniacal to think that all we have is our perception, the thing is that we still have no true knowledge or absolute proof of any other absolute, except for time, continuation, as the only thing that cannot be an illusion. So if extension exists in order to allow perception to exist and to continue for a present to be present, then there must be at least one other thing than us that exists. There must be something other than perception. you can construct the sentence and you can put the words together and you can say time is an illusion, extension is an illusion, continuation is an illusion of the senses. You can say the sentence, but there's no way to actually, just because you constructed a false sentence, it doesn't make that true, because the fact is that we are still continuing. And as long as you can say the words, we are or we aren't continuing to exist, or we are or we aren't experiencing illusion, that in itself, that in itself proves that you are still continuing to be able to talk, or that things are still continuing. So as far as it goes with illusions and time and continuation being an illusion, you can't really refute that. All you can do is say that it doesn't exist. All that you can do is say that it's an illusion. But there's more proof to the contrary. There's more evidence that time is not an illusion. There's there's more reason to believe that continuation does exist. But the paradox here, the real paradox here is, what is time's time? Are we time itself? You know, some people say we are reality experiencing itself. I don't remember where that quote came from right now, but I've seen a lot of people quote it, say it. And so if we're questioning what is reality, what is the core substance of reality? And as far down as I can see, that would be time. So the question is, are we time itself? Is time the substance of our minds? Are we made up of time? And is time, as a pure core substance, has it developed qualities over the continued existence of itself? What is time's time? What is the continuation of continuation? All this brings us to is another paradox. But is this paradox because we're missing information? In the future, will we be able to solve this paradox and show that it's actually not a paradox, that it's actually missing information and ignorance? And if we do, what does that do? Is that only another step forward in the knowledge of knowledge? Or will we always have another missing piece in our reality, our continued perception? Will there always be a piece missing? I don't know. I do not have that information. All I can say is that, as far as I can see, as far as the information that has been presented to me and everything that I've read and seen so far, and all of the reasoning and logic I've heard, when I bring all of the information together, all I can see is that time must exist, and that there is nothing that can refute this to the contrary, and that all you can do is falsely claim that time is an illusion with absolutely no reason or logic against it, other than to say that our senses are an illusion. So the sense of time must be an illusion. That can't be true, because whether you sense time or not, you're still there's still continuation. You don't have to be aware of time to know that things are continuing, that there is always some kind of extension or motion in some direction, even if the direction is unseen. Even if you are unextended in physical space, you are still extended in some other form, because that is continuation. It is an extension of some other. It is just continuation. As long as it continues, it is extending in time, and therefore it must exist. And then for anything to happen, it has to extend in time. And that is what I have. That is the philosophy, the beginner philosophy that I have attempted to develop based on what I've read and seen so far. And it is about time. And if you watch this and you um I don't know, people usually say like and follow at this point. Um, if you did like it, then maybe you should like and follow. Um, and if you have anything to say about it, um, leave a comment. And, I would love to hear what other people have to say about this time being something that provably, or maybe not that it provably exists beyond the senses, but that there is no way to refute that it doesn't, or there's no way to prove that it doesn't exist with the sense, and that that there is evidence, strong, seeable, like observable evidence with our senses, that you don't have to take it on faith that time exists. You don't have to take it on faith because you are experiencing time every time that existence continues. Every time that you finish a thought or a sentence or even think an entire whole word, you are experiencing the continuation. So, um, that is my philosophy, that time either exists, that time does have to exist outside of the core of perception, but it can exist with our perception. You could say that time only exists as long as we're perceiving it, but I'm saying you have to admit reasonably that time does exist separately, and that and that in order to have perception there must be time. So you can't only perceive time. You can't take time away from your perception. You can take other things away from your perception. You can take away the color red. You can be colorblind, but you can't be time blind. That's called being unconscious. So is consciousness time? Is time consciousness? They can't exist without each other. Well, you can't prove that time can exist without consciousness because you're unconscious and unaware at that time. But you can prove that consciousness can't exist without time. Therefore, time must exist